right? And in school, they teach you, and I've talked about this before, but like capital is supposed to be a fluid value transfer mechanism. It's not. It's in practice, it's just cement. All it's doing is just ingraining existing structures. So when I found, like free flowing capital that was on the internet and digitally native and was flowing all over the world to like brilliant, innovative new ideas, that got me really because, everything that I had known was really like capital being constrained to Silicon Valley and everybody having access to those deals was in, a bit of this boys club.
You're listening to Lights Camera Crypto, the podcast exploring all things entertainment and Web3. I'm your host, Stephen Ladden, and this week our guest is Colborn Bell. Colborn is the founder and director of Museum of Crypto Art, and this virtual venture he got to via an unfulfilling career in traditional finance. So that unfulfillment served as a catalyst. Colborn goes on to create the museum, and now the museum hosts 250-piece collection of digital art that's been showcased worldwide. It's wildly in demand. And in the episode, Colborn goes into detail on how the museum started, what its mission is, and how it's being a showcase, a voice for the best, the weirdest, the most diverse voices in digital art all across the internet. Really cool stuff. Let's dive in. Colborn, welcome to the...
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming aboard, and excited to take this journey with you.
I am too, It's really only when somebody asks me questions that I actually get a chance to kind of think about what has happened.
Well, perhaps that's the greatest gift, is to have outside influence help with your own reflection.
Facts. It can be a bit of an echo chamber in here.
Sure. Well, prior to it being an echo chamber, did you ever envision becoming the founder and director of the Museum of Crypto Art? Was that even a blip on your early
I
childhood mind?
I don't even think such a thing existed.
Right, right.
Yeah. So
Uh,
it's been a total invention manifestation of the present.
yeah, and so, and to that end, growing up, did you have an interest in art, museums? What was sort of the passion for you
I,
back then?
I I would say, my mother taught ballet, so there was always an appreciation for kind of fine art, higher art, aesthetic, and perhaps discipline. When I was 18, I went to New York and just fell really in love with the cultural access that city permitted. That was all rather new to me, but no particular interest or desire to like be an artist.
And when did sort of those aspirations or your passion for art kind of gear shift to the next level?
I mean, that's a good question. I can point to when I began to find cryptocurrency for sure as like a pivotal turning points in my life where I began to kind of assume more sovereignty and control over my actions and decision making. So then when you begin to kind of assume the role of, I guess, I think that is when you begin to think about the things that you want and the things that other people might want. Yeah.
And is that a different way of thinking and living than from when you previously found crypto?
Yeah, because the economic system is of course set up where you produce generally for other people,
Hmm.
right? So being the beneficiary of your own production, I think, is like a recognition of sovereignty. So meaning that I always had bosses.
A fancy way of saying you worked for somebody else.
Exactly.
And so previously, then, working for bosses, for others, what comprised, the majority of that trajectory of that line of work?
It was, a constant exploration of the intersection of finance and impact. When I was coming out of college, it was pretty much peak Great Recession. I had a wonderful degree and no opportunities. So I took the first thing that was given to me, and it was, an investment banking shop. And I did that for as long as I could take, which was 6 months. And I found it totally devoid and meaningless. And, I was on hourly wage, and the person right above me was making, he was clearing six figures a month. So that didn't, feel very good. From there, I wanted to explore more just like nonprofit work. I was working with United Nations Capital Development Fund for a while. Did that for 2.5 years, but that's a bit of a bureaucratic nightmare. So then kind of found the in between there of working at a wealth management firm founded by vegan Buddhists,
Wow.
and that was all kind of about value aligning your capital, which sounds great and in practice is pretty shallow. And then I had the opportunity to run the family office for a foreign family. And we were doing more of kind of the early stage angel investing, venture capital around energy, agriculture, and that was cool. And it was in that position that I found crypto.
Hmm. So it was sort of born out of your background in finance,
Yeah.
the pursuit of perhaps more ethical and sustainable ways of wealth management. And through that pursuit, you found your way to, you know, crypto Web3.
Yeah, everything. I was really looking for ways to maneuver and exist within the current financial architecture that was trying to facilitate the impact that I wanted to see in the world. And it frankly, it just didn't exist. Right. And in school, they teach you, I've talked about this before, but like capital is supposed to be a fluid value transfer mechanism. It's not. It's in practice, it's just cement. All it's doing is just ingraining existing structures. So when I found, like free flowing capital that was on the internet and digitally native and was flowing all over the world to like brilliant, innovative new ideas, that got me really excited because, everything that I had known was really like capital being constrained to Silicon Valley, and everybody having access to those deals was in, a bit of this boys club.
Hmm. Suddenly, that boys club was suddenly burst wide open, and the accessibility to create new clubs per se, and ones that perhaps had, to get back to those ethos, more alignment with the way you saw or envisioned a financial system actually working, were the seeds of that were happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think capital is a great way to bootstrap ideas and community. And it takes buy-in for ideas to actually come together. So I always have thought of the cryptocurrency market as just a futures market on ideas and thought. And, the way capital is allowed to freely flow in and out of different projects is, I think, a beautiful thing because it really allows people to, even without knowing where they're going, be able to kind of participate and show their support. And then everybody can kind of just work together to figure it out.
Well, right. It's like that communal feel on a global scale.
Exactly.
So you find crypto. What then allows you to kind of segue more into a creator and find the art and really zero in on that being your pivot away from traditional finance.
I'm pretty relentless and I love to explore. And, I had kind of the time and means and necessary background to, I think, understand it very quickly. So, being exposed to all of these ideas and business opportunities or ever token opportunities in the ICO boom was interesting. And, 99% of them failed, but the 1% that didn't were, they were incredibly revolutionary. And all of this led to kind of the understanding that, first there was an incredible group of technologists that really promoted this. Then came a bunch of capital and venture capitalists. And what I thought was really missing from like the ecosystem that could onboard more, perhaps normal people, was the way that everybody was communicating at the time, which was through images. So I was always very fond of like not a written or spoken language for these global, local communities, but that we could express ourselves visually. Um, and then kind of through experiments in the spatial web have these kind of co-created centers where we can gather and talk. And that was pretty much the genesis thought behind the museum.
And what do you mean when you say communicate through images?
Well, I think mediums like Instagram that are, globally available, searchable. This is we're communicating through our eyes. The eyes are the attention economy. These things are happening very rapidly, right? You're able to communicate. What is it? Picture's worth 1,000 words. It's true. You gather so much more information visually than you can orally or even in what you can say.
So in many ways, it was the communication of imagery. You saw it as kind of superseding words in many ways on a massive scale.
I mean, memetics, right? There are universal symbols, applications that can travel all over this globe and are immediately understood.
Mm. And where did the tie-in from a kind of art commerce perspective come into play?
I think I recognize that people don't particularly care. The easiest way to get people to care about something is to get them to buy it, right? So once they are invested financially is generally when they begin to like exercise autonomy and authority and decision making in that thing that they are invested in, and that is when they care about it.
And why is that, do you think?
I think because capitalism won. Like people just care about the things that are theirs. There's, object, massive commodification and the desire, innate human desire to just have as much as possible. That feels pretty like deeply ingrained into our evolutionary history.
So more the fact that the ownership piece, if I own something, I've put my money behind it, it's quote unquote mine. I care about it more because it's mine.
And frankly, I like the transitioning of like all of this massive physical consumption into the idea that it could be digital consumption, right? That seems more sustainable to me, and it seems to like fulfill this almost innate human need that we have to consume and be recognized for the objects that we have. And I wanted to definitely shift that away from just like massive physical consumption.
Well, and also too, there's no limit. You could conceivably think it could be argued that on a physical plane, there's a finite amount of things,
Totally.
but digitally there could be infinite.
Totally.
So how does that, do you think, play into that whole idea of amassing, continuing to amass? Are we essentially are we feeding the beast?
Well, I would like to think we're just evolving out of scarcity, right? I
Hmm.
don't think we need to. I think we almost have we I think we have enough resources. We have a resource allocation problem, and then we have certain power structures that hold things in place for certain reasons. But if we can begin to move into like post scarcity and begin to provide for people in these ways, I think this is helping to bring us there.
So essentially moving out of scarcity mentality into an abundant mentality
Totally.
and seeing where that wavelength takes society rather than the former, which promotes this idea, well, I have to get and get and get and consume and consume and consume. Here it's almost like more intentional consuming.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think everything I try to do is trying to like align with my morals. So I think it is like a moral imperative that we move away from like physical consumption.
And did you always have that moral belief, or was it influenced by the work with the Buddhist wealth management group?
Yeah, I mean, no. I mean, only in like the, I don't want to be mean, but only in like the false profiteering that was going on, right? Trying to live a little more authentically than the message and marketing that they were providing.
And so
I
in
don't
that,
really get how to be like a Zen Buddhist in a capitalist world and
yeah.
build, like I don't, there's enough information for people to put things together, and I just don't really want to speak on that or like wish, but yeah,
Well, it just seems like they're we can pivot. It just seems like those two things are very when you said it initially, I was like those two things seem to sit on very different goalposts.
the Zen Buddhist wealth management. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah, I'm not like, I mean, there's certainly a spiritual component to what we do. I think it's ethical as well. I think, the whole idea is to just empower sovereign creators, try and get people to break out of the system, realize their own ability to create, to like reintroduce the childlike wonder, imagination that so many people talk about finding here, and then give people the ability to just connect to others globally around a shared common interest. And I think the best shared common interest or thing that can spark any sort of discussion or conversation is art.
Mm,
So when you're in these digital spaces, it doesn't matter sex, race, religion, creed, where you are in the world. You can take whatever form you want in the metaverse. You can go see an art object and you can have a conversation about how you feel. For me, that is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Suddenly everything else dissolves. You're connecting human to human. The world feels much smaller and the problems suddenly don't feel as big as people might make them out to be.
totally. And would you say for those who don't know, is that the mission statement of the Museum of Crypto Art, or is that maybe talk a little bit about just for again for listeners who may not be aware what the Museum of Crypto Art is and sort of how that ethos that you just described influences
Yeah,
it.
so like when I stepped into this, the metaverse was green grass, blue sky, right? There was just like nothing there. So the first thought is, what do I want to create here? What is it that interests me? And the idea is let's build, a structure that begins to like assign history, value, and importance to the artifacts that are being created here. Let's invite people inside to begin to have conversations. Let's show how quickly we can just create digital exhibitions and host these conversations. And whereas normal museums take 6 months, a year, 2 years to put together shows and exhibitions, we were doing it in a couple weeks. And we've now like reduced that to, we've had ideas for exhibitions, and we have this interoperable architecture that allows us to spin up and deploy shows in minutes.
Wow.
So, I think the biggest problem, anyways, I went way off topic, but I'm going to keep going because I like this thought. Like, the biggest problem with cultural institutions of today is that they cannot respond in time to culturally relevant events, right? But digital artists have the ability now to like respond in time, to like create mimetic references and timestamp them and leave them on the blockchain and let everybody know that, for example, like today was the day that Wall Street bets, fucked over all the hedge funds. And like a bunch of artists were, making memes about that. And I think that's cool. And, the ability then for somebody like myself to kind of do a bit of a curating or meta architecting and putting all of these things together and then hosting that conversation is something I really enjoy.
Mm. And where do you derive most of the inspiration for the collections and the curations that you decide to put forth?
So the museum just structurally is a nonprofit foundation. It's internationally based. There is a collection of 250 pieces that it owns. Those are one work from 250 artists who minted prior to December 2020. I think that collection in general, which has been showcased all over the world and also in plenty of different digital metaverses, is really a look at the kind of like collective subconscious of these creators before there was a massive market event. So what were the precursors that led to, right, this major thing called NFTs really like exploding because, it came from art, and that was really, really surprising. So that is the collection that the museum has. There is also a collection of 9,000 artworks that are community contributed, and that also is kind of just like a check on like what are the things out there that people are finding important. How can we begin to like pull out and share artwork outside of the context of a marketplace? And from there we have the ability to create shows and then deploy them into these rooms, which are 3D interoperable architecture NFTs that can travel to many different worlds, including Webiverse, Hyperfi, Somnium, Decentraland, Spatial, kind of on and on and on and on. Zilla Hubs, VR Chat.
So, which is really kind of fascinating to process. So it's essentially these collections don't, it's like they're above space time in some way.
Yeah, I mean, and the cool thing about it is, Filecoin just gave us a grant to build a way back machine. Well, one, for the archival and storage of all of these assets, but two, for kind of like a way back machine for the curations that are being done, right? So all of these curations exist on chain. All of the artworks are like immutably stored and can be retrieved at any time. So it also kind of does facilitate that role of the museum as a preservation and archival solution.
Hmm. And what do you think in terms of an archival solution? How does that impact art just as we know it in terms of archiving?
Yeah, I mean, the other director of the museum, Shivani, she tells stories of, working in museums where, their digital archival solution was to like scan something and then upload it as a PDF to JSTOR. So I think just the decentralized nature of the blockchain is, it's resilient enough that there is no single point of failure. And ideally, there are redundancies being backed up in many, many places. So, I think it's a certainly, I believe it to be a better archival solution than whatever museums are doing currently.
And is that one of the goals of the Museum of Crypto Art is to be the archival solution for digital assets, particularly
I
art
don't
in this
say there's
case?
any goals like that. We've proven something, and I'd like to take those lessons to other people, and they can find a way to do it that they feel fit. I wouldn't tell MoMA that they like have to use our technology. But like I'm down to help them, figure out ways to incorporate blockchain to hopefully, yeah, store what they have, because, everything physical, of course, is like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It eventually will be gone.
And yet digital will remain.
And yet the digital will remain for sure. They just like for example, they had that massive fire in that museum in Brazil. I think the National Museum of Brazil, they lost like 90% of those cultural artifacts, and that's just like gone forever. So we have to ask ourselves, do we care in some capacity to like communicate and experience and be with the past in this way? And I think that's important. Yeah.
With the addendum to that question being, is there a difference between, so to use the Brazil example, suppose you have access to those collections that are now gone in digital form, does that change the relationship between people and the artifacts, or the something from history if it's digitized or not?
I think 100%, because like people probably don't know this, but the Smithsonian, for example, has a wonderful CCO, Creative Commons archive, like of 3D objects of just historical whatever. They have like primate skulls through all of human evolution. They have like busts of George Washington. And, that inspired me enough to go download Blender and begin to like assemble all these historical artifacts into a scene. And that is a new and novel way in which like I am engaging with history that otherwise I would not be able to see, experience, touch. And it's teaching me to like, or it's encouraging me to just be creative in collaging these in 3D space. I think it's fun. I think it's cool.
Well, and to your point too, the accessibility, I think, is, there's it's creating permanence in impermanence, in the sense that,
Yeah,
you know, God forbid another Brazil fire. Well, at least hopefully collections are digitized in some way, so that while they physically may be lost in this realm, they still exist and other people can continue to experience them in the event of such a catastrophe.
totally.
So, Museum of Crypto Art is born. You've amassed the 250 piece collection that's been shown worldwide. What's the sort of what do you hope to inspire in yourself and other artists through the museum?
Yeah, I want to totally invert traditional museum power structure and make it and take a ground up approach instead of kind of a top down selection and pushing of culture, right? It's no surprise that the majority of artifacts in museums come from white Western male, right? So you have this very limited voice and just showcasing blockchain technology as that kind of like egalitarian force that democratizes market access and inclusivity is key to what we're doing, right? I want to see and I want people to be able to express their creative voice from wherever they are. I want it shown in our museum. I want to give them the tools to showcase and highlight the weird corners and just not play into like market narratives around what is art, because the market narratives are literally replicating the same thing, because that is what that art power structure is trying to control and dictate.
And so by doing that, it's opening up the idea of what art can be to people who may have perhaps been fed a limited scope of what art or what they think art is. So on this journey, what has helped validate that the Museum of Crypto Art has staying power, and that people it's something people have enjoyed and will continue to enjoy?
Okay, this is great. I have a perfect example. We have a token that allows people to contribute their voice in a curatorial. And, we had a third party doing a streaming vest of our team share token, right? That third party was hacked. The token price, they dumped it open market down from $3 to 25 cents. And there was not a single person, whatever, 3,000, 4,000 holders of the token, not a single person complained about price, right? Because they got it. They weren't there for like the price of this token to go up. They just wanted to be included in the mission. And that was incredible. That was, the worst and best day of the project, because of course, like, and then, and then also, all of the team incentive was wiped out. And it's not like everybody just threw up their gloves. We just like doubled down into it because people love it. They actually care, right? The artists care about the mission, the team cares about the mission. And it was such a wonderful outpouring of support for like what we were doing. And everybody saying like, just keep going. And like, of course, like, I think it's in our blood now.
Mm. And what a great representation of the community that you have built and are continuing to build, whereby it not only showcases the museum's resilience, but that of everybody involved.
Totally. Totally. That's how just also like the movement has staying power. right? Like people have connected through these, like I have friends all over the world now. It's incredible. Everywhere I go, there's some, it's just, it's wonderful. And it's such a beautiful thing to feel that like interrelatedness and be able to come home and like be filled with so much gratitude and desire to just like dive back fully into the project each and every time.
And do you think that by the project existing, that other artists are taking note and are being inspired to, as you had said earlier, kind of lean into their weird corner of the world and create the art that is most honest for them, knowing that if nothing else,
Yeah.
that this place exists to put forth those ideas and those thoughts and those
Man, I
imagery.
hope so. I hope so. If we can inspire one person to share their weird little voice and try and like bring them to the center and say like it's cool, like we want to showcase this, like your experience is valid and matters and like we recognize you. That was always the coolest thing in the world. And incidentally, I ended up acquiring all of these pieces, but the only thing I was trying to do in like bidding on artwork was just to tell people that was like especially when I was going through like old stuff on super rare stuff that had been there for like 2.5 years untouched on bid, like just say like, hey, I see this, I think it's cool, and just leaving that timestamp as a recognition and acknowledgement that like you created something, you put energy into something, you shared it online, like I saw it, I recognize it, and I give it value. And it doesn't particularly matter what that dollar sign is. But I think people recognizing each other in that way and it being whatever, anonymous or trustless, like all of these are potential features, right? I'll say now, like we're trying to orchestrate, an anonymous artist exhibition for women in Iran to begin to
Mm,
like visually communicate to the outside world what they're experiencing and what they're feeling.
wow. Which is no small undertaking, I think, particularly with the, I mean, in the news every day, seemingly the tensions and the violence continues to get get more and more aggressive, and so I think that's a. I mean, there's also a real risk associated with that as well.
Totally. Like I don't think there's individual risk for us. There's individual risk for the artists,
Right.
of course, right? But like I think we have this is like literally our obligation to showcase these things because this is an exemplary example of what crypto art means.
And to your point from earlier, the stories that can be told from the imagery.
Totally.
So maybe if we could use that as a just a we can blow this up as a an example of how one of these curations could go down. So let's walk through the process. Is it contacting? Do you reach out to artists specifically? Is it artists coming to you? How do you choose? Which artists, which pieces? How is that,
Uh,
and how the narrative?
I will say I have given up control and processes and kind of just go entirely on gut and instinct, right? We did recently hire a director of programming that has put a little more structure into into my life and what we decide to do and showcase. But like I said, once we have the art, it takes us 30 minutes to put it into an exhibition and deploy it into a world,
Wow.
right? And then suddenly people can just instantly be there. So, if there are good and novel and interesting ideas, and that's, that technology we are like giving to people so they have the ability to do that as well, right? So that is our kind of floor rooms architecture and ecosystem. All of our curation technologies and those rooms are how we fund, the development of new technology and kind of pay the writers that do the storytelling.
And once a piece or a collection is up, how long does it stay in this?
The idea is that now we've worked to a point where generally it can stay forever,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And Filecoin gave us the grants to build the technology so that if it does go away, it's immutably stored on chain so it can be instantly retrieved.
So it's almost like it has a permanent home base that can then be,
So anybody could just call that architecture and reproduce that show at any time.
wow. So you don't have to be in Brazil to
Yeah, you don't have to be anywhere, you know. It's crazy because, I think of my legacy as like, my blockchain history. I literally think of like these are all the people all over the world that I'm touching. That is much more important to me, like the energy effects of those ripples and everything that was done in the beginning leading to this point. So like now just give as many people the power to do the same. And suddenly, you might have been just an artist, but now you're an artist, you're a collector, you're a curator, and you run a room in the Museum of Crypto Art. So you are the museum. All of these decentralized nodes are the museum. I don't matter anymore. That's kind of the whole goal of this, is just to like make myself as obsolete as possible and just kind of let it carry on independently without me and let the collective voices just speak to the power of the platform.
wow. So it's almost like you gave birth to the platform. The platform grows up a little bit and the platform turns 18 and you're kind of like, all right, you're
Look, I am nothing without like Renee and the tech team at Quellcode and the co-director of the museum, Shivani. They're way better than me. Like, I was here just a little bit earlier, but they were able to like realize and create something that I could only like kind of talk about
well, how
conceptually.
and how are you able to take your ideas and communicate them in a way that helps them? How did you help empower them through what you could only, as you were saying, sort of intellectually recognize as this thing?
Yeah, I think again, when you give intelligent, smart people freedom to create passionately from their hearts, they're going to do everything to the best of their ability instead of like sitting over them and telling them what to do. Right? Like if you have enough honest communication about the thing, then eventually if smart, intelligent people kind of they get it. Right? It's not a crazy concept, but kind of the bricks along the road to like lay it out, or like the breadcrumbs to take somebody into that position. Renee was like long time Ethereum 2017 Web3 developer, like best of the best, absolutely brilliant. And Shivani, I poached out of like a Harvard medical lab, but she had a background in art history and computer science as well. And the just like trusting the universality of it, like everything has happened as it was supposed to, and the right people have been attracted to the project in unspeakable ways.
Wow, which is an incredibly holistic approach, but I think you nailed on something extremely important, which is empowering people to both listen to and follow through with what their heart is speaking for.
Yeah.
And in contrast, it sounded like the early days of working for a boss, in those older or traditional financial models, that it does, just going out on a limb here, it doesn't sound like that's the environment where your heart is perhaps allowed to express itself in the way that is both most meaningful for it and most beneficial to whatever's being worked on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have never told anybody no, right? I'm down to have a conversation, but if they want to do something, like, hell yeah. Like, the project is meant to be plug and play. Like, if you love and care and are passionate about something, like, here are the tools. let's do it. It's not, it really, I really truly believe it to be very antithetical to the traditional art world, which is built around gatekeeping and exclusivity and access. This is just the opposite. And I think, frankly, that intimidates a lot of people because it's so outside of any model that they know. And like a lot of people are scared to make that leap of faith into something that is so new and so different and really requires like a lot of trust in other people.
Well, and that trust, particularly in today's world, is there's a to cultivate that trust is in itself an asset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, trust is there's no trust in this world, right? There's just, I mean, I think capitalism breeds competition. So when you begin to play in abundant spaces with people who like bring a lot of love and care and passion to what they do and are very genuine and authentic, like the rules of the whole architecture are totally rewritten, and how we begin to interact and appreciate one another again is like individuals is really enhanced. I think I catch just personally a lot of flack for being very critical of people that like continue to push like the hyper commodification of art. And I was very anti like PFP in the beginning because there's something so much more beautiful about like assembling a collection of artwork that you care about instead of like huddling into a corner with 10,000 people and saying like this is the best, this is the best, this is the best. Those are very diametrically opposed concepts. Like you can be whatever you want to be, but please don't choose to be like a member of an in group and say like this is the most important in group. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine then that the same on the same wavelength, you wouldn't want to someone to be part of an in group and then act or behave or communicate in a way that was a little more selfish or narcissistic or something that would not promote communal gain but perhaps just individual gain.
Right. I think like Bored Ape Yacht Club was absolute like the biggest exemplar of just like how trashy and terrible and fucked up the world is, right? When you begin to mix like these aesthetically horrendous pictures of apes with like all of this venture capital money, with like all of these like Hollywood, storytelling professionals, like pimping out celebrities so that people just follow in behind, like, and then they're just caught holding the bag. Like everybody else loses. These people are pretty much untouchable. Everybody, there are no consequences, right? Other than now, like a class action lawsuit against all of these celebrities who did pimp these things.
Moving forward, then, how what can we expect? I know you mentioned the project with the Iranian women and artists, and in addition to that, what can we expect to see from the museum, from you in the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully just more subversive, avant-garde, weird, cornered fetching, all of the wonderful things that we have the liberty to do as a nonprofit, we get to do. And we have to go back and reset the layer of trust amongst the participants because NFT globally now is a really, really dirty word. And I have to prove that NFT and crypto art in particular was not just a market innovation, but that there is actually like real art here and there's an important culture being expressed. And the blockchain as a tool is permitting all of these voices to be heard. And these digital spaces, this movement into spatial web is a like real powerful occurring phenomenon that has me and so many people like totally enraptured and wanting to speak on its behalf. And that's, that's within the museum, and then just personally continuing to build tools, outside of that for artists for their creative freedom and self-expression.
With that said, do you think that what's the biggest obstacle then in terms of communicating to people that NFTs and the crypto sphere aren't isn't it's not this scary place. Sure, there are examples recently of things going, completely amok, but there's also the example that you provided of when the coin for the company, plummeted and everybody stuck by the mission and it wasn't about, making a profit on the coin. So, one small microcosm of a bigger, call it industry. How do you combat folks who think, oh, well, this is just a fad, this isn't anything?
I mean, I show them a piece of exemplary art that couldn't exist anywhere else.
Mm.
It couldn't exist in any other medium. And I have like a go-to project that I think does that really, really well.
Do you care to speak about it here?
Sure. I mean, look, I am entirely, I have eight, so this is, certainly biased, but I think they're great, and that's Matt Kane's Gazers project, because one, the complexity isn't off the charts. It's aesthetically just gorgeous. I think globally, every culture has some, recognition of kind of looking at the moon and being appreciative of the moon. There's a very individual connection that people have when gazing upon the moon, and it's a living, dynamic artwork that changes with the lunar cycle.
Mm.
And that literally just couldn't exist anywhere else. So, one of those will set you back like 50,000 bucks. It's not like big alpha here anymore, but that's a project I love to show to people first, because it just makes the art very real and apparent, and people get it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think again, getting back to the heart of it all, there's an intersection with that particular piece that you mentioned where you can feel as an observer the heart that the artist put into it,
Yeah,
and sort of then there's that connection between, with the filament being the piece itself between artist and viewer, and then on a 5,000 foot view, the museum being part of that, excuse me, helping to foster that connection.
yeah, exactly. And I want to be able to just, it's really just offering as many little breadcrumbs for people to then just like take the initiative to go down the rabbit hole, discover work that is interesting to them, connect with those artists, and hopefully like begin to consider themselves, art collector, because it helped me through a lot. It's certainly made me better. And yeah, yeah, that's a whole other side to this. My personal journey through this, but art is different to everybody, and the individual meaning that you derive, whether you own it or not, it's wonderful to be exposed to creators instead of kind of like a pre-programmed Instagram feed, or all of these other algorithms that were tuned to really leave us in the same state as we were yesterday. There
Mm.
is something very exploratory and self-defining about like digging through the crates of artwork and just like seeing and just noticing what catches your eye and why, and beginning to like describe that to yourself, like, why do I care about this piece? Well, it's either it's either a mirror or a door, right? I think that might be another Matt Kane quote, but like, art is either a mirror or a door.
In that it's reflecting something back to you that you are familiar with or relate to, or it's opening a new perspective for you to embark upon.
Well said.
Would you on that tip, care to comment on the personal journey that these works have kind of taken you on, and how they've added value to your life?
Yeah, certainly. Like having gone through, the ICO boom and working with a lot of people and putting together a significant amount of investments, I found myself just like very personally unfulfilled. And I found myself ending up having worked, in like the frenzy of it all with just like not the best people. So that market and that dynamic just attracted, something that didn't make me feel good about the work.
Mm.
So it was definitely an intentional shift to get out of finance, again, to begin to like find a truer, better, more authentic version of myself, um, at a time, when I was feeling like broken, confused, and, I was pretty much like all alone in the woods. So I gave myself a lot of personal space to like discover and re-engineer and rebuild a new or a better version of myself. So, I like it's incredible to go back through the collection that I have, because just like, that song that puts you right back in that place, those artworks kind of weave the path that I took, and I can see something in each one that I was either moving towards or running away from. And then at the end of the day, if that makes you feel something, then you end up feeling less alone. And
Mm.
whereas working in business or finance can make you feel very alone and very in competition and like at the behest of somebody else, well, suddenly like here is somebody that is relating and connecting to the world in the same way that I am. And you begin to rediscover pieces of you that you either didn't know existed or had been lost or forgotten. So I encourage everybody to just, yeah, begin to explore.
I love it, and in many ways, like any art form, whether it's, as you mentioned, music or any other piece of something that can connect you to others or other ideas. It's fascinating to hear how your journey sort of, how art influenced your healing journey in a way.
Yeah, I mean that was real therapy for me. I've been to therapists, I've spoken with therapists, like that doesn't work. Like I think in everything, I found the best way is to just do it yourself, but you got to figure out how to do it yourself.
Amen. Amen. Well, for folks interested in trying to maybe take the first step and figuring it out themselves, or potentially getting more involved with the museum, or getting in contact with you, what's the best way for people to, find you, find the museum, find
Yeah.
what's happening?
Website is a good start, www.museumofcryptoart.com. We have a native DApp. That's app.museumofcryptoart.com. They can find us on Twitter at Museum of Crypto, on Instagram at Museum of Crypto Art. My personal Twitter handle is CO1BORN, and DMs are open. So hit us up. Let us know what excites you and what interests you, and hopefully we can do something together.
Amazing. Well, Colborn Bell, thank you again for your time and lending your experience and, anecdotes about both Web3 and your own personal trajectory. Really, really enjoyed the time.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Lights, Camera, Crypto, a podcast produced by Matt Bogart and Decentral Media. Music by Brian Duncan and Kareem Imes. If you enjoyed this experience, be sure to rate and subscribe to our show, and to follow @Sladden and @Decentral Media for additional content.